Johnny Carson reveals the 9 guests he banned for life. In Hollywood, there is an unwritten rule that every star eventually learns. Sometimes too late. You can survive scandal. You can survive addiction. You can even survive box office failure. But there was one mistake you could never come back from: angering Johnny Carson. For more than 3 decades, Johnny Carson wasn't just a late-night host. He was the gatekeeper of American entertainment. A single appearance on The Tonight Show could launch a career overnight. A friendly nod could turn a struggling performer into a household name. But a cold silence from Johnny Carson? That could end everything. Behind his calm smile and razor-sharp wit was a man who took loyalty, respect, and professionalism very seriously. And when someone crossed his personal line, Johnny didn't argue. He didn't scream. He erased them. Tonight, we're opening Johnny Carson's unofficial blacklist. 9 guests who committed the ultimate taboo and paid the ultimate price. 1. Joan Rivers, the ultimate betrayal. During Johnny Carson's reign over The Tonight Show, thousands of celebrities passed through his studio. But only one was treated like family: Joan Rivers. When Joan first appeared on the show in the mid-1960s, she was an unknown comedian barely surviving in New York clubs. After her performance, Johnny Carson famously looked at her and said, "You're going to be a star." That single moment changed her life. Johnny became her mentor, her champion, and eventually gave her the greatest honor of all. She became his permanent guest host. When Johnny took vacations, Joan was the only person allowed to sit in his chair. To the public, she wasn't just a guest. She was his heir. Then, in 1986, everything collapsed. Fearing NBC might replace her with younger talent, Joan Rivers secretly signed a deal with Fox to host her own competing late-night show. She didn't tell Johnny. He found out through the press. To Johnny Carson, the issue wasn't ambition, it was betrayal. Loyalty mattered more to him than ratings or contracts. And learning the truth from a headline rather than from Joan herself cut deeply. When Joan called Johnny to explain, hoping their 20-year relationship would save her, Johnny answered calmly, coldly, like a stranger, "I hear you have your own show. Congratulations." Then he hung up. That was the last time they ever spoke. Johnny Carson banned Joan Rivers from The Tonight Show for life. Her name was never mentioned. Her old clips were sealed. Even when her show failed, even when her husband later took his own life, Johnny never softened. For Johnny Carson, betrayal was unforgivable. To Wayne Newton, the man who threatened the king. Wayne Newton, known as Mr. Las Vegas, was polished, flamboyant, and wildly successful. But to Johnny Carson, he was irresistible comedic material. During the early 1980s, Johnny frequently mocked Wayne Newton during monologues, often making jokes about his masculinity and sexuality. The audience laughed. Wayne did not. First, Wayne tried to handle it quietly. He contacted producers. He asked politely for the jokes to stop. They didn't. Finally, Wayne Newton snapped. Instead of calling lawyers or managers, Wayne drove straight to NBC studios. Using his fame, he walked past security and into Johnny Carson's dressing room, unannounced. According to Wayne's own account, he grabbed Johnny by the lapels, pinned him to his chair, and issued a direct threat. If Johnny made one more joke about him, Wayne promised violence, not lawsuits. Johnny Carson was stunned. But he was also smart. He realized this wasn't a bluff. Johnny never joked about Wayne Newton again. But he also never invited him back. Wayne Newton won the confrontation, but lost access to the most powerful stage in America. Johnny Carson didn't fight back. He erased him. 3. Chevy Chase, talent without respect. Chevy Chase was once the hottest star in America. As the breakout face of Saturday Night Live, he was handsome, funny, and wildly popular. At first, Johnny Carson saw promise in him. But it didn't take long for Johnny to see something else: arrogance. Backstage, Chevy was notorious for treating staff poorly. He mocked assistants, snapped at makeup artists, and behaved like royalty. Johnny Carson treated his crew like family. Hearing complaints about Chevy immediately put him on edge. On air, things were worse. Chevy interrupted Johnny, leaned back smugly, gave dismissive answers, and behaved as if he were doing the show a favor. He mocked other comedians openly and often crossed the line from humor into cruelty. Johnny Carson loved comedy, but he despised bullying. There was no dramatic blow-up, no confrontation. Johnny simply told his producer, "I don't want this guy anymore." And just like that, Chevy Chase disappeared from The Tonight Show rotation. While others became regulars and benefited from Johnny's support, Chevy's invitations quietly stopped. Talent couldn't save him. Character mattered more. For Jim Garrison, the conspiracy peddler. In 1968, America was still reeling from the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Jim Garrison, the New Orleans district attorney, claimed he had shocking evidence exposing a massive conspiracy. Johnny Carson, curious and socially aware, invited Garrison on the show and gave him unusually generous airtime. It was a mistake. As Johnny pressed him for concrete evidence, Garrison dodged questions, relied on vague theories, and made sensational claims without proof. Johnny quickly realized he wasn't interviewing a truth seeker, but a man exploiting tragedy for fame. Live on air, Johnny dismantled Garrison's arguments point by point, exposing contradictions and forcing him into visible discomfort. After the show, Johnny was furious. He believed the audience had been insulted and, worse, misled. Jim Garrison was banned permanently. Johnny Carson would not allow his platform to be used for what he considered dangerous nonsense. 5. Yuri Geller exposed on live television. Few guests angered Johnny Carson as personally as Yuri Geller. Before television fame, Johnny was a trained magician. He loved real skill, but hated frauds who claimed supernatural powers. Yuri Geller claimed he could bend spoons with his mind. Johnny didn't believe him. Before Geller's appearance, Johnny secretly consulted skeptic and magician James Randi. Following Randi's advice, Johnny ensured all props were provided by the show, untouched by Geller. On air, Geller failed completely. The spoons didn't bend. The drawings couldn't be guessed. Sweat poured. Excuses followed. Johnny didn't rescue him. He didn't crack jokes. He let the silence expose everything. For over 20 minutes, millions of viewers watched a supposed psychic unravel. Yuri Geller never fooled Johnny Carson or his audience again. 6. Milton Berle, the king who wouldn't step aside. Milton Berle was a television legend, a man whose name was synonymous with the birth of TV comedy. Known as Mr. Television, Burle had built an empire, shaping the medium and entertaining millions. But when he appeared on Johnny Carson's stage, two eras of television collided, and ego met ego. Burle wasn't just loud, he was overpowering. He constantly interrupted Johnny, hijacking conversations meant for other guests. He smoked thick cigars in the studio despite Johnny's polite but visible discomfort, blowing smoke directly into the host's face. And worse, Burle treated Johnny like a colleague in need of guidance, patting his shoulder, slapping his thigh, and attempting to teach the king of late night how to do comedy. On his own show, Johnny Carson, who valued subtlety, timing, and control of the stage, found this behavior intolerable. Every gesture, every interruption, chipped away at his patience. Yet, out of respect for Burle's legendary status, and perhaps to avoid a public spectacle, Johnny never officially banned him. The ban came quietly, in the most effective way possible. Invitations stopped. Gradually, Burle disappeared from The Tonight Show, fading from Johnny's carefully curated world without a word spoken on air. Even the greatest stars have limits. Milton Berle was a giant of television, but his inability to recognize someone else's domain cost him the favor of one of the medium's true kings. Johnny's studio was a sanctuary, and Burle had overstepped the line. Sometimes, even legends must learn to step aside. 7. Raymond Burr, too silent for television. Raymond Burr was a brilliant actor, celebrated for his iconic roles as Perry Mason and Ironside, yet brilliance didn't translate to talk show charm. Burr's presence on The Tonight Show became a cautionary tale for hosts everywhere. From the moment he sat down, he radiated solemnity. One-word answers, monotone delivery, and an almost robotic demeanor greeted Johnny's attempts at conversation. He shared no anecdotes, no behind-the-scenes stories, no humor. His legendary acting skills seemed to vanish the second he crossed the studio threshold. Johnny tried everything to break through. Jokes, self-deprecating humor, playful teasing. He even resorted to subtle desperation, hoping to ignite some spark. Nothing worked. The energy between them was like talking to a wall that had charisma and fame but no flexibility, no spark. Afterward, Johnny joked dryly that he would rather endure a root canal without anesthesia than interview Raymond Burr again. It wasn't personal. Burr wasn't rude or arrogant. He was simply ill-suited for television. A brilliant actor who belonged on screen, not on a late-night talk show where improvisation, charm, and engagement were everything. Johnny learned that even the most celebrated stars could be disastrous if they couldn't meet the unique demands of live television. 8. Ryan O'Neal, arrogance on display. In the 1970s, Ryan O'Neal was Hollywood royalty, the heartthrob of a generation, adored for his roles in romantic dramas and tragic love stories. Fans swooned. The press adored him. But when he came to The Tonight Show, his fame didn't translate to respect for the stage. From the moment he entered, O'Neal exuded disinterest. He slouched in the chair, stared at monitors, and ignored Johnny's carefully crafted questions. The interview, meant to engage both host and audience, became a demonstration of indifference. He treated the stage like a chore, an obligation to endure rather than an opportunity to connect. Johnny, meticulous and professional, felt a personal sting. This wasn't just a casual slight. It was disrespect in his own home. He didn't explode in anger, as he had with others. Instead, he quietly made a decision that spoke volumes. If he doesn't want to be here, don't invite him back. And just like that, Ryan O'Neal vanished from Johnny Carson's universe. No public statements, no drama, just a silent but permanent lesson in humility. 9. Bob Hope, the guest Johnny couldn't escape. Bob Hope was an anomaly on Johnny Carson's list. He was never officially banned, yet he occupied a unique place in Johnny's mind as the guest he dreaded the most. Hope was a living institution, a comedy machine honed by decades of experience and supported by teams of writers. Every joke was pre-planned, every response rehearsed. He arrived on stage not as a guest, but as a polished performer reciting lines like a human recording. Johnny valued spontaneity, listening, and the subtle art of improvisation. Bob Hope brought none of it. Every interview was mental labor for Johnny. The audience laughed, oblivious to the hidden strain. Johnny's smile, perfect as ever, was at its fakest. Beneath the charm, he was silently enduring the monotony. Hope was too powerful to refuse. He had studio clout, box office draw, and the freedom to call NBC executives directly. But Johnny's respect was never earned. 9 names, 9 stories, 9 lessons. Johnny Carson's chair wasn't just a seat, it was a test. Talent could get you there. Fame could open doors. But only humility, respect, and integrity kept you coming back. In Johnny Carson's world, kindness mattered more than celebrity. Betray loyalty, treat others with arrogance, or fail to engage with honesty, and the door closed forever. Johnny Carson's chair wasn't merely a place to talk. It was a mirror reflecting character, a stage where pretense was stripped away mercilessly. And in that sanctuary, the unworthy simply didn't survive.